The Apple M4 Max Studio is finally here, and in this video we're going to go through my first impressions of this computer, who I think it's for, the things I like, and also the things that I really wish Apple would change about the M4 Max model. Now, I do want to say this is a first impressions video, so we're going to have an updated video coming out later with even more detail and thoughts about this computer, and we're also going to have a lot of accessory guides on this channel to help you get the best accessories for your Mac computers in 2025 and beyond. So the first thing I noticed as soon as I got this out is I had to run a disk test on it, and the speeds coming in at it were about 6,000 megabytes a second on the write side and right at about 5,500 megabytes a second on the read side, which is faster than any other Mac I've ever used. Now, I did get the 2 terabyte model with the M4 Max that has the upgraded GPU. I also have 64 gigabytes of RAM installed in this computer as well. So it's not the base model of the computer. It'll be interesting to see what other users are getting with their 1 terabyte and 512 terabyte versions of the Mac Studio. But once I got all my applications on the computer and I started doing some editing in Final Cut Pro, I was really surprised at just how fast this actually handles. Timeline skimming, running multiple 6K clips at once in the multicam view was just buttery smooth on this. I was able to leave it in the better quality version and I experienced no dropped frames on it. And I've been using the M1 Max MacBook Pro ever since it came out, and that one has been an amazing computer for me as well, but I've just started to notice it slowing down a little bit, especially with some of my new workflows that are using more of the higher resolution file types. So I shoot a lot of 6K footage, and this computer is handling it like a boss. And then whenever I go to export videos, I did a 10-minute export of a 4K timeline that used multiple 6K cameras, a little bit of color grading, some audio effects, and that export took about 2.5 minutes, which on my old computer clocked in right at about 3.5 minutes. So the export performance gains are not quite as crazy as I thought, but whenever you're doing a ton of video exports over a long amount of time, longer videos, a bunch of short videos, all the time savings that you can get is really going to save you money and time in the long run. So that's one of the reasons I went with this computer. I also tried some of the newer Final Cut Pro features like using the magnetic mask and using transcribe to captions and some of the other AI type of features, and these were running faster and better than ever on the computer. It was very impressive to see it quickly going through the frames and doing the magnetic mask, and it may have just been me, but it also seemed to be a little bit more accurate than what I was getting out of my M1 Max MacBook Pro as well. The next thing I've noticed is just how quiet this machine is. It has very good cooling. It does have fans in it, but I didn't notice the fans ever kicking on, even whenever I was putting it through the most demanding of workloads on Final Cut. It just kept chugging along, doing great. So I really appreciate that over the MacBook Pro, which you don't normally hear the fans, but sometimes when you're doing video exports or if you're working on more intensive timelines, then you will start to see the fans come on and you'll hear the noise a little bit. It's not crazy loud, but just the silent operation of this computer is very welcome. The next thing that I started experimenting with, but I don't feel like I've seen the full potential out of it yet, is the fact that you can run dual 5K displays with the Thunderbolt hub on it now that this supports Thunderbolt 5. Also, Thunderbolt 5's bandwidth is doubled over the Thunderbolt 4, so that's just going to allow for faster SSDs, and it's also going to prevent you from running into bottlenecks as quickly. So before, if you used a Thunderbolt dock or Thunderbolt hub, and then you also wanted to use faster SSDs, the 3,200 megabyte a second SSDs, you would start to notice that those devices could slow down as you were running more and more peripherals, or you were just going to be limited to how many peripherals you could plug into one port on the computer. But that's the next thing that's cool about the Mac Studio. It's just all the ports on the back of it are something I did not expect to really like. Since your power is already coming through the power port, you have 4 Thunderbolt 5 ports, 2 USB-A ports. Also, the 10 gig network port is going to come in handy as soon as I set up a NAS. So I'm not going to have to use one of those ports for a dongle. And then on the front of it, the USB-C ports and the SD card reader are very handy. But this leads me to one of my complaints about the Mac Studio, and that's the fact that you have to go all the way up to the M3 Ultra if you want to get Thunderbolt ports on the front of the computer. I would have loved to see the faster ports on the front as well because I use a lot of USB 4 and Thunderbolt enclosures for my SSDs, and that would just give me the ability to plug them in quickly and efficiently and change from one computer to the next without having to reach around to the back of the computer to do that. But I'm not willing to double the price of the computer just for that added convenience. But it would be so great if Apple could just put Thunderbolt ports on the front of the computer as well. My guess is it has something to do with the Max versus Ultra chip architecture, and that it's just some sort of limitation that the Max chips have, that you can only have so many Thunderbolt lanes on it. My other biggest complaint with the Mac Studio is not the price of the computer. I think the base model at $2,000 is going to be a really great computer for most people, But if you really want to get the best graphics performance, then you have to upgrade to the M4 Max chip that has more GPU cores. And as soon as you do that, then you're going to be adding $500 right out of the gate. And you also have to go up from the stock 32 gigabytes of RAM up to 48 gigabytes of RAM. And at that point, you're up to $2,500 and you still just have a 512 gigabyte SSD. So I would have loved to see Apple put a 1 terabyte SSD in this computer stock. If they would do that, that would be an amazing value and it would make all the other upgrades feel like less of a big deal. So I went with the M4 Max with more GPU cores, and I also went with a 2 terabyte SSD and 64 gigabytes of RAM, which unfortunately really pushes the price of this computer up very quickly. So if Apple was able to just make that base model a little bit better value, give you a 1 terabyte SSD, or maybe just do one M4 Max chip instead of the binned version of it, that would be a really great option to add even more value. So I really am enjoying using the M4 Max Studio. I think this computer shows tons of power, tons of potential. It should last a really long time. It is so fast and so smooth. I'm very happy with this purchase. I think the other thing that I'm kind of confused about with Apple is the fact that they went with an M4 Max and an M3 Ultra chip instead of having an M4 Max and an M4 Ultra chip. And there's rumors that it might have something to do with the architecture of the M4 Max chip. Maybe there's never going to be an M4 Ultra chip. Maybe they're saving the M4 Ultra chip for the Mac Pro. Again, all this gets a little bit confusing and hard to know which computer you should buy. But I think most users should probably just stick with buying the M4 Max with the upgraded GPU and then start to think about the other upgrades and configurations that you're able to make as you purchase your computer. If you're confused about what M4 Max Studio to buy, then I do have a video guide where I've gone through all the options on it to help you pick the best one out for your use case. I'm going to have a link for that video up here. If you got any other questions about the M4 Max Studio, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear them. Like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any upcoming content.